Welcome everyone to the Hurting Humanity channel. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which is a U.S. Department of Commerce, a branch of your government, has thankfully come out with an article where they want to get the record straight. They want to set it straight. They want you to know the truth. So they're going to fact check and they're going to debunk any and all crazy conspiracies about weather modification and weather control. And they're going to fact check some really important points that I'm going to show you here in this video because we need to set the record straight. No one creates or steers hurricanes. This technology does not exist. And of course, I'll prove to you that it does exist. I mean, come on. They're going to fact check us. We might as well fact check them and share information like this so the common person out there can understand if they could remove themselves from the man-made distractions, the left-right paradigm, and all this other stuff they have you thinking about and realize that the government is at war with its own citizens and using weather modification and weather control to get away with it so that you don't see that they're actually there doing it. Now, for anybody who has the notion, of course, that controlling the weather is crazy, that's been ingrained in you since you were young. That's why you've always heard things like you can't predict Mother Nature, you can't control Mother Nature. That was to set you on a course through your life to think that things like this were not humanly possible. But of course, even going back to the 1940s and 50s, we've heard out in the open, even presidents like JFK and Lyndon B. Johnson talk about how their goal then was to be able to control the weather.
We shall propose further cooperative efforts between all the nations in weather prediction and eventually in weather control.
It lays the predicate foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world.
So, of course, they were talking about controlling the weather all the way back then. And now we could actually, back then, I mean, they didn't even have cell phones. They didn't even have really, cordless phones back in those days. Of course, they had the technology. It was just about conditioning people to accept this technology in their day-to-day lives and become dependent on it first before they could unleash it on the public. So now, of course, you could do all sorts of things on your phone. You could bank on your phone. You could watch football on your phone. We've heard all the stuff over the years that you could do with your phone. So just imagine what they could do with the weather since then. And of course, they have openly admitted to using it in the Vietnam War and Operation Popeye. They have openly admitted to some of it, but they pulled back since they used to openly admit that they had the ability to do these things, and they've actually scrubbed, as I'll show you in this video, a lot of their patents and documentation off of government websites about weather modification and weather control because they didn't expect any of us to actually wake up to what it is that they're actually doing. So back to NOAA, back to the government fact-checking its civilians. And of course, this isn't to fact-check anyone. This is just to put out what is real misinformation, government misinformation, to make sure that the sheeple stay herded and under control. So the first thing they do is they claim, quote, the claim is that the government is creating, strengthening, and or steering hurricanes into specific communities. The fact is, folks, no technology exists that can create, destroy, modify, strengthen, or steer hurricanes in any way, shape, or form. All hurricanes, including Helene and Milton, are natural phenomenon that form on their own due to aligning conditions of the ocean and atmosphere. Of course, we're going to take them at their word, right? Because how could you actually create the weather, right? I mean, you could, for example, I mean, if I was just a thinking man, which I am, I mean, you could actually make artificial clouds in the sky, but you just wouldn't expect anyone to notice. So you could fly these airplanes above us, tell us it's water vapor, and then, of course, we look up, and all of a sudden, a blue sky day turns into a hazy sky, and nobody thinks about why that is, right? Or if you want to just talk about on a massive scale, because some people might say, well, how would they create hurricanes with something like that? So you're telling me that they're going out in the middle of the ocean with these planes and flying them up all around the middle of the ocean to create hurricanes, and then what? Well, I'm not saying that they're doing the geoengineering over the oceans. I'm saying they're doing the geoengineering over the states. Over the ocean, well, they wouldn't need to fly the planes because they could just take something like, let's say, NASA's Cloud Machine. You're familiar with NASA's Cloud Machine, where the BBC has even reported on how NASA makes these huge clouds come right out of this huge machine and then, of course, can make it rain within minutes? Well, if you haven't seen it, take a look. Well, if you haven't seen it, take a look. Well, if you haven't seen it, take a look. Well, if you haven't seen it, take a look. Well, if you haven't seen it, take a look. Well, if you haven't seen it, take a look. Well, if you haven't seen it, take a look. Well, if you haven't seen it, take a look. Well, if you haven't seen it, take a look. Well, if you haven't seen it, take a look. Well, if you haven't seen it, take a look. Well, if you haven't seen it, take a look. Well, if you haven't seen it, take a look. Well, if you haven't seen it, take a look. Well, if you haven't seen it, take a look. Well, if you haven't seen it, take a look. Well, if you haven't seen it, take a look. Well, if you haven't seen it, take a look. Well, if you haven't seen it, take a look. Well, if you haven't seen it, take a look. Well, if you haven't seen it, take a look. Well, if you haven't seen it, take a look.
This is the loudest sound you could possibly conceive. And as it turns out, the cleanest. That cloud up there, which was generated by the engine, is just a mixture of hydrogen and oxygen. It's water vapor. And in about an hour's time, someone in Mississippi is going to get wet washing. It will actually rain. I told you. It's raining. NASA's playing God. It's making its own weather.
Oh, right. So there you have the BBC showing you this giant fog machine. Wait a minute. I thought NASA was flying out into space. I thought NASA was trying to figure out how to get back to the moon since we haven't been back since the fake footage they showed us back in the 60s. What is going on here? What is going on? Oh, right. Because these things are all fronts for other things. You see, if people out there knew that their tax money was going into forming weather modifications so that the government could use weather against you and do things like they just did to people in the Carolinas or in Florida every month, well, then people would probably revolt against their tyrannical government, right? But, you know, that's just a cloud machine. And just imagine, right? Because you could sit there and people go, well, that's just in Florida. It's sitting at NASA. So, you know, what in the world is that? You know, you're just being, you know, you're pulling straws out of a hat here. And, you know, you're showing us a cloud machine, fine. You're showing us NASA, okay. But how do, you know, they're not out in the middle of the ocean, right? Because you don't know what's out in the middle of the ocean, do you? Do you know what's out there? Are you getting pictures constantly of what's out in the middle of the ocean? Hundreds, thousands of miles into the middle? Of course you don't know what's out there. But we know that people that we could trust, like Bill Gates, have announced funding for seawater spraying cloud machines, right? So those are probably nothing about making clouds out in the ocean and forming, building hurricanes out there, you know? Or like these huge things that we've seen over the years out in the middle of the ocean where we have no idea what they are. And we're supposed to just say, well, it must be some kind of generator in the middle of the ocean. Or the wind turbines that are out there. They couldn't possibly steer the weather, could they? I mean, how would you actually make a hurricane stronger? I mean, the CIA head director, John Brennan, you know, he doesn't know what he's talking about, right? He's one of Obama's right-hand men. I mean, he's spoken at the Council on Foreign Relations about having the ability to move weather around. Or how about Operation Project Cirrus, 1947, where it was documented that the government was dropping dry ice and all sorts of things in the clouds to make hurricanes larger and have the ability to move them around, right? I mean, this has got to be a conspiracy, right?
Project Cirrus is the first official attempt to modify a hurricane. It was run by General Electric with the support of the U.S. military. The official theory was that by changing the temperature outside the eye wall of a hurricane, which they did by seeding the clouds with various compounds such as silver iodide, a decrease in strong winds will result. On October 13th, 1947, Project Cirrus targeted a hurricane heading out to sea. Approximately 180 pounds of dry ice was dropped into the clouds. The crew then reported a pronounced modification of the cloud deck, and the hurricane abruptly changed direction and made landfall near Savannah, Georgia. The public blamed the government. Irving Langmuir, who pioneered General Electric's atmospheric research department and admitted that the project was about learning how to weaponize the weather, also claimed the reversal of the hurricane had been caused by Project Cirrus. But the government denied it for 12 years.
Another example is the array of technologies, often referred to collectively as geoengineering, that potentially could help reverse the warming effects of global climate change. One that has gained my personal attention is stratospheric aerosol injection, or SAI, a method of seeding the stratosphere with particles that can help reflect the sun's heat in much the same way that volcanic eruptions do. An SAI program could limit global temperature increases, reducing some risks associated with higher temperatures and providing the world economy additional time to transition from fossil fuels. This process is also relatively inexpensive. The National Research Council estimates that a fully deployed SAI program would cost about $10 billion yearly. As promising as it may be, moving forward on SAI would also raise a number of challenges for our government and for the international community. On the technical side, greenhouse gas emission reductions would still have to accompany SAI to address other climate change effects, such as ocean acidification, because SAI alone would not remove greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. On the geopolitical side, the technology's potential to alter weather patterns and benefit certain regions of the world at the expense of other regions could trigger sharp opposition by some nations. Others might seize on SAI's benefits and back away from their commitment to carbon dioxide reductions. On the geopolitical side, the technology's potential to alter weather patterns and benefit certain regions of the world at the expense of other regions could trigger sharp opposition by some nations. On the geopolitical side, the technology's potential to alter weather patterns and benefit certain regions of the world at the expense of other regions could trigger sharp opposition by some nations.
Oh, okay, good. I'm glad that the CIA Director John Brennan, the former CIA Director John Brennan, cleared that up for all of us so that we know about having the ability to alter weather patterns, but I'm sure that's a conspiracy as well. So now we've taken the checks of the creating, the strengthening, the steering of the storms, which are all out in the open for everybody to see. And let's move on to the next claim, right? Here's a claim. NOAA, which is who we're talking about here, the National, again, it's the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. The claim is that they can modify the weather, but here's what the facts are according to them. They do not modify the weather, nor does it fund, participate in, or oversee cloud seeding or any other weather modification activities. Their objective is to better understand and predict the Earth's systems from the bottom of the seafloor to the surface of the sun. They're depending on understanding and deploying new resources to improve forecasting and give communities earlier and more accurate warnings ahead of extreme weather events. NOAA is required by law to track weather modification activities by others, including cloud seeding, but has no authority to regulate those activities. So, isn't it interesting that they've scrubbed this off of their website since Milton and Helene have hit? I mean, they had all of this documentation, hundreds of pages of weather modification reports that were directly on their website. Even had a little tab called Weather Modification Project Reports, where they were giving you all of these weather modification projects that are taking place. But if we go all the way back to the beginning of this story, I thought that there was no way to modify. I mean, they specifically say no technology exists to modify the weather, right? The headline says no one creates, steers, or modifies weather. The technology doesn't exist, yet they had a little thing on their website where you could go and see weather modification project reports. But I'm sure they just coincidentally removed it at the same time that people were actually waking up to weather modification and weather control. Kind of like at the same time people were waking up to all these rumors of nanotechnology getting inside of people's bodies, and then all of a sudden there was a massive purge on the internet to remove that information and anybody that spoke about it, right? All right, let's get to the next claim. NOAA is involved with projects like HARP and SCOPEX that modify weather. Fact, they are not associated with those projects, neither of which can modify the weather. HARP's just a small little National Science Foundation funded facility in Alaska that conducts research on the ionosphere, okay? That's all that they do, folks. That's all that they do. In addition, of course, to making artificial northern lights, artificial auroras, right? That's not one and the same. I mean, it's out there that HARP is doing these experiments and they're making artificial auroras. And at the same time, we're seeing the northern lights popping up all around the world. But I'm sure that's just a mere coincidence. Now, one of the things they want you to think, which kind of works to their advantage, is that most people automatically just say HARP when there's weather modification going on. So everybody thinks to Alaska, so they say, how could some little antenna system in Alaska control the weather all the way down in Florida? But these things are set up all around the United States. They're actually set up all around the earth. They're on military bases, and then they have all of these other towers around, whether it's the 5G towers or NextRad. They have all this stuff sitting in front of us. We can't explain what it actually is, right? We're just told that these things are supposed to make our phones go faster. And that's enough for the sheeple to allow these huge towers to be put up in their backyards or around their communities because they need to download music faster, right? That's what they think it's actually there for, yet nobody has even seen a difference with any of these towers around. Of course, they believe the excuses that the government gives as if the government's trying to figure out the weather beforehand so that they can warn you about upcoming storms because they care about you, right? Which brings me to the claim that the government is engaging in activities like cloud seeding to modify the weather. Let's set the record straight. As I read this to you, of course, I will play for you on the screen just a few of the patents from going back to, 1891 that the government has, the United States Patent and Trademark Office, of weather modification and cloud seeding. So NOAA does not fund or participate in cloud seeding or other weather modification projects. Cloud seeding is the only common weather modification activity currently practiced in the US, typically by private companies. So who's given them the authority to do this, right? Who has the authority over the sky that would give private companies the ability to fly over our heads and dump chemicals on us? I mean, this is like giving Jeffrey Dahmer or John Wayne Gacy the keys to a plane so they can go up and fly above us. Would you trust them up there in the sky? Of course not. So who runs the private companies? Who's held responsible? Well, you're not supposed to ask questions like that. And you're also supposed to not ask questions to the government. That's why we're telling you it's hate speech and we're trying to censor you, because we don't want you to realize that we're all a bunch of mass murderers. So in addition to that, of course, we have things like weather as a force multiplier, owning the weather by 2025, which the Air Force documented back in 1996. We have all these patents of hurricanes. And of course, why would the government ever do this to us anyway? I mean, we have to think in terms of Republicans and Democrats, right? They're not friends with each other. So it depends, I guess, who's in power. Because if Donald Trump's in power, apparently, according to MAGA and the Republicans, we're never going to see cloud seeding again, right? Because it wasn't there in 2016, 17, 18, 19, or 2020, was it? No, it wasn't. Of course it was there. There was never stopped because these people are working together. They're keeping you thinking about them, about do they hate so-and-so? Meanwhile, they could show up at these galas together and shake hands with one another, while on television they're telling you that they're trying to throw them in jail, that they hate one another, that they're going to ruin democracy. Meanwhile, they're the ones who are doing all of this stuff to us, keeping you distracted with things like that. Now, it's important to realize that the military is in place to protect these wicked people from all of us. You don't really see the military doing much else. They send them over to Afghanistan, they send them over here. So you think that that's what their purpose is. But of course, the military is in place eventually to come after us. And of course, who would ever think anyway that a new world order was in place, or that the government had staged all of these things over the years and done all of this research so they could use it on us?
So what we have here, according to us, to the Senate and Congress and other people, are folks that will look you straight in the face and say, well, the idea of weather control, creation of earthquakes electronically and all of that's absolutely ridiculous, Mr. Fletcher, or anyone else that might ask it. However, we find out that our nation 20 years ago actually went into an entire convention that said, now that we can do it, we promise that we won't use it against other countries. Well, unfortunately, that promise does not include using it against ourselves here in the United States. So, again, when Senator Cole had asked me what it was that I meant, inferring that the New World Order persons will utilize it as a weapon against us, that was what I meant. A friend of mine said, there's patents on that equipment. And as you can see here, he's absolutely right. These are the paperwork of the actual patents on the electronic means by which waves or rays, if you will, can be utilized to block, stop, move, alter, change the weather. It includes creating storms, expanding them, and even generating ELF, low-frequency vibrations that actually can move Earth in the ground itself and possibly generate the possibility of earthquakes. But the very equipment that's being used presently, covertly, secretly, in a multitude of outrageous experiments and programs right now, the application of magnetics, electronics, electronic waves, and what have you, is all come off of the original Tesla experiment.
So, of course, they always want you to have the illusion in your mind that the government doesn't have the ability to do it. When you figure out that the government does have the ability to do it, then their next job is trying to convince you that they would never do that to their own people, that this would only be in place to use against Russia or China or someone else. So that's why I have to remind everybody that your government did just lock you up for a couple of years, tell you to wear face diapers, tell you to social distance and not see your grandma on the holidays. And they also told you to put something inside your body, which, of course, was not going to make you immune to anything, but they were hell-bent on you getting it in your body, so much so that they took the ability for people to earn a living out of play and said it's more important for you to get something that won't make you immune to a supposed disease than for you to actually have the ability to work and provide food and water for your family. So you tell me, does the government look like they're tyrannical? Does the government look like they're trying to cover up weather modification and weather control? Of course they are. So thanks again for the fact check. I'm glad that we were debunked. I'm glad that, none of us could actually see the planes every day spraying above our heads, or none of us could actually see what NASA's really doing. You know, NASA was just trying to make a big cloud, everybody, because they were hosting a Sweet 16 party. You know, somebody said they wanted a little storm for their party. They wanted some clouds. They're trying to block the sun for the Super Bowl. I mean, what excuse could they actually come up with that people would believe? Well, it seems that people will believe anything. So NASA having a giant cloud machine, literally where we're told that they're going out into space, folks. We're all looking at our watch. When are you getting out there? I mean, you can't give us these green screen footage all the time and tell us to believe it, and then release movies like Fly Me to the Moon and then expect us to actually believe that you've gotten to the moon and you can go back to the moon if you didn't lose all of the documentation. That's the excuse that they have. We lost all of the documentation. We can't figure out how to get back there, but we will one day, right? That's why every time we fly a rocket up, it veers to the side because, of course, you would think common sense would say it would go straight up, but they tell you that the thing is moving, so it goes to... I mean, all this stuff is just, it's make-believe. It's one lie after the next, after the next, after the next. People just need to use their own eyes and look at the world through their own eyes and see that, hey, somebody's got a cloud seeding machine. If I told you that some random civilian who had been in jail for murder had a cloud seeding machine, would you say that you would want to take that cloud machine from them, that they shouldn't have the ability to create clouds over your home or over here or over there? Right? But NASA, you can't question NASA. Everybody loves NASA, just like you can't question Big Brother, right? Everybody loves Big Brother. Don't worry about Bill Gates funding seawater spraying cloud machines. They couldn't be doing this all around out in the ocean, building these hurricanes up and then steering them on shore. That's just a conspiracy theory, which has been proven to be conspiracy fact. I thank everybody for being here. Hope you're all doing well. God bless you and your families as always.